We're going to talk about now Turkey's Pan-Turkic aspirations. Basically, Turkey's aspirations to control Central Asia and how the peace agreement that was brokered by the Trump administration between Armenia and Azerbaijan, leading to Armenia agreeing to give away its border with Iran to the United States, indicates this grand aspiration by Turkey to form a Pan-Turkic empire, since what the Turks and the Azeris plan to do is to create a direct trade route from Turkey into the Caspian Sea and thus into Central Asia. And by establishing such a trade route, Turkey would then make the argument that Turkey is directly linked to the Central Asian Turkic countries. And that now it is time for the Turkic peoples to come together, and we have to support our Turkic brothers over there in China to weaken the Chinese. And this is something that is desirous. This is something that is desired by the United States. And also the fact that Armenia has agreed to give up its border with Iran to the United States is something that Israel is demanding. This is the part of the deal that benefits Israel, because NATO being on the Armenian side of the border with Iran is about isolating Iran from the Black Sea, thus isolating it from the rest of Europe, and thus weakening and isolating Iran itself. And this would be to the benefit of the Israelis. So the Israelis are benefiting, the Turks are benefiting, and the way that the Turks are benefiting is that they're going to get a direct trade route from itself all the way to Central Asia. That'll benefit the Europeans because it will allow the Europeans to import Central Asian resources while bypassing the Russians. So there's that. But at the foundation of this, ideologically speaking, is this aspiration by Turkey to form a Pan-Turkic union, connecting Turkey with Central Asia. Because such a trade route would connect Turkey with Central Asia. And then Turkey would have more material by which to make the argument that now it's time for the Central Asian peoples to unite. And NATO is definitely applauding this, because that would mean a Turkic power, a series of Turkic countries under the umbrella of Turkey going against the Chinese and the Russians, going against the Russians in the Caspian Sea, going against the Russians in the Black Sea, and then also going against the Chinese in Central Asia. August 8th Peace Declaration, Turkey's strategic role in uniting the Turkic world. The historic peace declaration signed between Azerbaijan and Armenia is opening the doors to a new era in the South Caucasus, while Turkey's diplomatic and geopolitical contributions stand out. With the opening of the Zangazour corridor, a strategic route will be established for the Turkic world. This route will not only connect Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, but also link a vast geography stretching through Turkey to Central Asia and Turkic kin communities. So this is about making a trade route from Turkey through Nakhchivan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and going into Central Asia to unite the Turkic world. So it can be used, and it will be used, as a symbol of Turkic unity. The Turks are using this already as a symbol of Turkic unity. We have to unite together. NATO, like I said, wants this because that would mean a giant Turkic power that can be used to foment an uprising in the Xinjiang province in western China. So it says here, this document, signed by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan under the mediation of U.S. President Donald Trump, not only established peace between the two countries, but also reinforced Turkey's regional role and created a strategic basis for the integration of the Turkic world. You see what happened here, guys? So the Americans talk about peace between the Azeris and the Armenians after 35 years or whatever of fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh. But now the Turks have the green light to begin their trade route. And the Americans are going to help establish this Zangazour corridor. And there's going to be a railway system connecting Turkey with Azerbaijan. And it's going to be a part of a trade route going directly from Turkey into Central Asia. And it'll be a perfect symbol for Turkic unity. And this is also, I mean, ultimately on behalf of the United States, on the part of the United States, this is about just sticking a needle right into Russia's underbelly in the South Caucasus. Oh, there's a direct trade route from Central Asia into Europe. Oh, why should we import Kazakhstani oil or natural gas through Russia? We could just do it through Ukraine. This is going to empower the Turks over the Russians. This is what this is about, giving the Turks an edge over the Russians geopolitically. So it says here that the opening of the Zangazour corridor will enable a direct connection between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, forming a geo-economic route extending through Turkey to Central Asia. The opening of the Zangazour corridor will enable Turkey to establish a direct land connection with Central Asia. This will form the basis of the Turkic World Geo-Economic Belt. Turkey is planning energy, logistics, and digital infrastructure projects along this corridor. New lines are on the agenda as an extension of the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. Now remember, when they did the Armenian genocide, they used the railway system, specifically the Berlin to Baghdad railway system, to systematically slaughter the Armenians. These developments align with Turkey's 3C strategy, which aims to establish a trade and security axis between the Black Sea, the Caspian, and the Persian Gulf. Guys, this is what the Black Sea Task Force is about. The Turks are leading the Black Sea Task Force for Europe as a way to go against the Russians in the Black Sea. They want to rival against the Russians in the Black Sea. They're already doing it. So it's about going against the Russians in the Black Sea, using the Turks, going against the Russians in the Mediterranean, also using the Turks, going against the Russians from the West, using the Germans and their European allies, and then also going against the Chinese, using the Turks from the West and using the Japanese from the East. This is the NATO strategy. That's a summation of the NATO strategy right there. It's quite, I mean, to me, I think it's quite scary. I really do. I am frightened by this news because I read history and I read enough of the nitty-gritty details of history. I read enough of the nitty-gritty details of the Armenian genocide to know of the bloodthirstiness of the Turks against the Armenians. And when I read that the Turks have been given the green light to build a railway system through Armenia, thus trampling over Armenia's sovereignty, and when I read about how Nagorno-Karabakh has been given over to the Azeris, even after they committed horrendous war crimes against the Armenians, I know that history is repeating. And I read enough of history to know that it is extremely ugly, frightening, and demonic. And we see what's happening in Gaza and how they want to move an entire population of people out of Gaza. In the future, Turkey will say, Israel, you did this. No one has the right to tell us to do the same thing, be it to the Armenians or be it to you, the Jews of Israel. Because the Israelis right now are laughing. They're thinking, okay, well, we have this agreement from Armenia to give away its border with Iran to the United States, thus enabling NATO to establish itself to patrol Armenia's border with Iran. The Iranians are saying, you are messing with our sphere of influence. Armenia is a part of our sphere of influence. You're messing with our sphere of influence. You're trying to block us from our only reliable access way by land into Georgia, thus into the rest of Europe, and thus into the Black Sea. We will not allow this. It's a provocation. And Israel is laughing about this because they're weakening the Iranians. That's their goal. That's why they took out Hezbollah. That's why they took out Bashar al-Assad. But in Israel's war against the Iranians, Israel is empowering an even bigger monster, and that is the Turks. So while there is going to be this NATO patrol of Armenia's border with Iran, and while Bashar al-Assad was thrown out to the weakness and to the ire of the Iranians, at the same time, Turkey has been rising as a result. As a result of Bashar al-Assad being thrown out, Turkey has risen in the Middle East. As a result of this agreement of Armenia to give away its border to the Iranians, Turkey is being empowered because Turkey now says, okay, we're going to get our corridor. We're going to link ourselves all the way to Central Asia. We're going to integrate ourselves all the way into Central Asia. And we're going to get even more powerful. We're going to become even more powerful. And so what the hell is Israel going to do against a massive Pan-Turkic empire? The answer is Israel is going to be destroyed. That's the answer. And in Central Asia, you have all these Muslims who hate Israel, and they are just itching to get their hands on the Israelis. And people say, well, Turkey doesn't have a big enough army to establish this empire. It doesn't need one. Why? Because if Turkey can convince enough people in Central Asia to follow Turkey, it wouldn't need an army. Turkey would then have an unlimited number, an unlimited amount of not just the natural resources of countries like Kazakhstan, oil, natural gas, uranium, which is needed to make nuclear bombs, which would enable Turkey to make it to more easily become a nuclear armed country. But Turkey would also have an unlimited amount of manpower coming from these Turkic Central Asian countries. Kazakhs, Uzbeks, those people. Do you see what I'm saying here? It would be not only a Turkish army, but a Pan-Turkic army. Turkey's army alongside Turkey's auxiliary forces from Azerbaijan, from Central Asia, from maybe Indonesia. And guess what? Oh, speaking of Indonesia, do you know there is a country that has already agreed to buy Turkish Khan fighter jets? I think it's Indonesia. Was it Indonesia or was it Malaysia? Which one is it? Indonesia. And Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world. It is the most populated Muslim country on the face of the earth. Most Muslims are not even Arab. Most Muslims are not Semitic. Most Muslims are Asian. Central Asians, Southeast Asians. And Indonesia hates Israel. Talk to any Indonesian. They'll tell you, free Palestine from Indonesia, free Palestine. They are itching to get their hands on Israelis. So Israel's going to be facing what? Turkey, Central Asia, Indonesia. Israel's fucked. Israel, I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but Israel is going to be turned to Wasreal. All right, I'm just saying. And I'm not saying this with glee. I'm saying this with sadness. I don't want to see people getting destroyed. I don't. But I'm just telling you, this is the inevitable future of Israel. It's the inevitable future. Indonesia has agreed to buy Turkish fighter jets. So Turkey is making links with all of the Muslim world. And if Turkey can become the hero of the Muslim world by being the hero for the Palestinians, the Muslim world is Turkey's oyster. All right? It is. Now, what are we talking about here? So, Highway to Peace or the Next War, and the title is talking about this Zangazour corridor that Turkey and Azerbaijan want to establish in order to build a railway system connecting connecting Turkey with Azerbaijan, and thus building a straight trade route from Turkey, going from Turkey into Central Asia. So let's read through this article. I'm just going to read the excerpts that I highlighted here. So it says here, hold up, guys. When Armenia and Azerbaijan signed a U.S. brokered deal in Washington this August, with Donald Trump taking credit as peacekeeper or peacemaker in chief, it was quickly branded the Trump route to stability in the South Caucasus. On paper, it promises peace and prosperity. In practice, it's a lot more complicated. The new transport corridor cutting through Armenia's Syunik province isn't just an infrastructure project. It's a geopolitical choke point tying together the ambitions of Baku, Ankara, Washington, and Brussels. So the Turks, the Azeris, really Turks, the Americans, and the Europeans, the Germans, all have interest in this. And also the article should have also mentioned Israel. Because Israel also has a huge interest in this against the Iranians. Now, the article mentions Syunik. Guys, if you want to, if you have the time, go on my channel. You know what? I'll do it for you guys. I'll do it right now. For how many years have I been talking about the Syunik province of Armenia? And I said, guys, look out watch out for the Syunik province in Armenia. The Azeris have their eyes on the Azeris, and the Turks have their eyes on the Syunik province. I said this. I said this years ago. Let's take a look. Here we go. 1 year ago. But I've been talking about it for longer than that. But here is a video 1 year ago. The target of Azerbaijan, the Syunik province of Armenia. And I knew the Turks want to build a corridor through the Syunik province. I knew about this. Here's another example. What Turkey really wants in the war over Nagorno-Karabakh, control over Central Asia. And I did a lot more videos about this topic, and I wrote a whole bunch of articles on this topic. I've been talking about this for years and years and years. The Syunik province. And what are they talking about now? The Syunik province. And what is the whole deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia about? It's not about peace over Nagorno-Karabakh. It's about the Syunik province. It's about having NATO put its patrol in the Syunik province to enable Turkey to empower itself in the Caspian Sea region and in the South Caucasus against the Chinese and against the Russians. That's what this is about. This is a geostrategic strategy. Now, let's go back to our article here. So it says here, for Yerevan, it could turn out to be less the dawn of a new chapter and more of the next round in a long fight to hold on to its land, only this time under a very different set of rules. And I'm telling you, when this thing is established, Turkey is going to have the power to just willy-nilly cross into Armenia anytime it wants. That's going to be the end result. Turkey is going to have the power, the freedom to just travel through Armenia anytime it wants. Azerbaijan can do the same thing. And Armenia is just going to be flyover country. That's what it's going to be. It's going to lose all geopolitical significance. It's going to be flyover country. And Turkey's going to say, okay, Armenians, you guys are kind of like a speed bump for us, so maybe we should try getting rid of you. Now, remember, Azerbaijan does not call Armenia Armenia. It doesn't. You know what it calls Armenia? Azerbaijan calls Armenia Western Azerbaijan. Yes. Azerbaijan calls Armenia West Azerbaijan. And the Americans are saying, well, you know, everyone's sovereignty has to be respected. Azerbaijan does not respect the sovereignty of Armenia. If it did, it would call it Armenia. It calls it Western Azerbaijan. Why does it call Armenia West Azerbaijan? Because it considers Armenia to be really historically Azerbaijan, and it considers the Armenians to be people who do not belong on that land, which means that according to Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan has the right to drive all the Armenians out and or kill them. So perhaps one day Turkey is just going to say, listen, Armenia, you guys are a big fat speed bump for us on our journey to Central Asia. It's best that we just get rid of you guys. So that way this whole region can be perfectly, purely Turkic. What happened during the Ottoman Empire times in World War I? The Armenians were refusing to Ottomanize. And the young Turks who were ruling the Ottoman Empire said Armenians need to be Turkified. And they are refusing to be Turkified, and they are working with the Russians, our arch nemesis. Therefore, we should just exterminate every single Armenian. And that's exactly what the Turks began to do during World War I. And they went to the point, they went so far as to invade Armenia in the South Caucasus to finish the job. And the Armenians defeated the Turks, defeated the Ottomans. So it says here, the deal's headline feature is a transport corridor running through Armenia's Syunik province, connecting mainland Azerbaijan with the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. Yerevan has even proposed an official name for it, the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. That's just wishful thinking right there. Under the terms, the corridor will be operated by a private American company on a 99-year lease with an option to extend. Now, guys, we have recently seen the fruits of private American companies' labor. We have seen the fruits of the labor of American private contractors in Gaza, Remember, Trump was talking about feeding the Gazans? Oh, America wants to feed the Gazans. We don't want to see starving Palestinians. So America made a deal with these private contractors, American mercenaries, and they went over to Gaza to patrol the distribution of aid to the Palestinians. And what has happened? What has happened under the auspices, under the overwatch of American private contractors in Gaza? The Israeli military is allowed, under the watch of said American contractors, to murder Palestinians as they are coming to get food, and over 1,000 Gazans have been murdered in this regard under the watch of American private contractors. That is the fruit of American private contractors getting involved in America's foreign policy, watching as America's proxy Israel butchers civilians. And so Turkey is an American ally. Turkey is a very important American ally. It's America's way of controlling Russia's access from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. And so what happens if Turkey just starts butchering Armenians? What happens if Azeri soldiers begin to rape and butcher and behead Armenians under the watch of NATO's patrol? America's not going to do shit. Just like America's not doing a damn thing to stop the Israelis. Because at the end of the day, what is the most important? What's the most important thing? It's not human life. We don't give a fuck about human life, even though that is the most important thing. What is most important is our bottom line, and that is it. Power, money, industry, whatever. That is the bottom line. Bottom line. All right? So it says here, the corridor will be operated. Okay, I already read this. What else do we got here? Turkey, Azerbaijan's closest ally, also stands to gain, as Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan openly put it. The corridor would knit the Turkic world together, linking Central Asia to Europe through Turkish territory. In Ankara's view, it's not just a bilateral arrangement, it's a strategic bridge for Pan-Turkic integration. Europe, too, gets something out of it. This is very important. Access to Central Asian energy routed through NATO territory. You see how important this is for the NATOists, for the Europeans, for the Germans? Oh, well, we can import Kazakhstan oil or Kazakh natural gas or maybe even uranium. We can just streamline those resources directly into Europe without having to go through Russia. That's correct. Sign me up. So this is going to empower the Europeans, the Germans, the Turks. What happened during the Armenian genocide? The Germans and the Turks worked together to butcher the Armenians. Because Turkey was a strategic ally against the Russians. And the Armenians were an ally with the Russians. And so the Armenians had to go. And what do we have today? We have Armenians being an ally to the Russians. And we have the Turks being used as an ally of the Germans and the Americans against the Russians, against the Chinese. Of course, Europe would prefer the presence of, say, the French rather than the Americans. That would feel more secure for them, considering the current tensions with Washington. But still, for Europe, this is far better than having so much corridor at all. Having no such corridor at all. Armenian political analyst Karen Igitian told RT. For the United States, the corridor serves multiple strategic goals. First, it opens a secure route for moving Central Asian energy westward without passing through Russia or Iran. The second crucial aspect is the potential to supply arms to Central Asia. Arms to Central Asia in the event of escalating tensions or conflicts, which, as Washington believes, would involve Russia. So why do they want to arm Central Asia? To go against the Russians, and the article doesn't mention this, but it's to go against the Chinese. The Russians and the Chinese, the arch enemies of NATO and America. In such cases, Americans would have the ability to deliver weapons and ammunition without any obstacles. Unblocking communication routes without establishing this corridor would raise doubts in the U.S. about the reliability of such supplies. And perhaps most importantly, it puts Washington in a position to exert lasting influence in a region where Russia has traditionally called the shots. The influence is exactly what worries Iran and Russia. Tehran has warned that the corridor could destabilize the regional balance, redraw borders, and undermine Armenia's sovereignty, which is true. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader went so far as to threaten that it would become the graveyard of Trump's mercenaries. So Iran is saying, we're going to have to become violent if you do not respect our border with Armenia. Armenia's position is the most complicated. It gains the promise, and only the promise, of peace, along with potential economic openings from restored transport links. Azerbaijan's expectations are set high by its own leadership. In December of 2020, President Ilham Aliyev described Zangazour, Gegharkunik, and Yerevan as historical Azerbaijani lands, and at a party congress 2 years earlier, framed Yerevan as a city Baku ultimately aims to take back. Guys, you know what Yerevan is? Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. Azerbaijan is literally saying the capital of Armenia belongs to Azerbaijan. If you want to take... listen, we all thought, I didn't think so, but people thought it's just Nagorno-Karabakh, right? If Azerbaijan can just take Nagorno-Karabakh, that's it. The fighting will stop because Azerbaijan will have taken something that historically belongs to Azerbaijan, and international consensus is that Nagorno-Karabakh belongs to Azerbaijan. So therefore, if they just get Nagorno-Karabakh, we'll have peace and blah, 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 right? They ain't stopping at Nagorno-Karabakh. They want to take the whole damn country. They want the whole freaking Armenian country to belong to the Turks. That's what I was trying to tell you guys. They see Armenia as a speed bump. They see Armenia as an obstacle. Imagine, you want to create this Pan-Turkic world that's going to have this direct trade route from Turkey all the way to Central Asia. And in the middle of all that, you got this non-Turkic country, Christian country called Armenia, and it doesn't like Turkey. So the Turks see Armenia and they say, man, we really want to get to Kazakhstan. We really want to get to that Kazakh oil and natural gas and uranium because we want to make nuclear bombs so we can take out Tel Aviv. So Armenia, you're just kind of in the way. Like, we have to kind of appease you because you're an ally to the US, and you're just a pain in the ass. Plus, Azerbaijan says that Armenia actually belongs to Azerbaijan. So who's stopping us at Nagorno-Karabakh? We ain't stopping at Nagorno-Karabakh. We're going to keep going. This monster ain't going to stop. And they want to make this purely fluid Turkic route. But you can't have that with Armenia because Armenia is sandwiched in between Azerbaijan. So how do we get to that Kazakh oil? How do we get to that Kazakh natural gas and uranium without having to go through this annoying little country called Armenia, which historically belongs to Azerbaijan? That's not what I believe, but that's what the Turks believe. It's not looking good for Armenia. I'm telling you right now, it is not looking good. And this whole railway system that they want to have built going through Armenia, that sounds like, I don't know, that sounds like a preparation for another Holocaust, using the railway system to kill people. I hate to talk about this stuff. I really do. It doesn't give me joy to talk about this stuff. I'm giving you just my perspective here based on history and current events. It's horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying, the things that I'm talking to you guys about. Armenian analyst Karen Igitian cautions that a paper peace may not hold. Quote, this agreement could move the sides closer to a formal peace, he says, but it doesn't guarantee actual peace. And he's right. In his view, Azerbaijan considers the entire territory of Armenia to be Western Azerbaijan. How can you have peace with people who think that your country is actually their country? And months before, it reminds me of Netanyahu. Months before October the 7th, Netanyahu presented a map showing Gaza as being a part of Israel. They always wanted Gaza. They were always planning on taking that region. Same thing with Azerbaijan and Armenia. They want Armenia, not Nagorno-Karabakh was just a pretext. That was just a way to begin the process. Well, the international consensus is that Nagorno-Karabakh belongs to Azerbaijan, so Azerbaijan is just going to invade Nagorno-Karabakh, and the world's not going to do anything about it because internationally the consensus is that that land belongs to Azerbaijan. And then what happened in 2022 or 2022? Yeah, what happened in 2022? Armenia got invaded. Azerbaijan literally invaded mainland Armenia. They didn't stop at Nagorno. They went right into mainland Armenia, killed hundreds of Armenian soldiers, took an Armenian woman, tortured her, cut her breast off, cut off one of her fingers and stuck it in her mouth. You can look it up. They did this in mainland Armenia, not in Nagorno-Karabakh. In mainland Armenia, they did this. NATO was watching and didn't do didn't do fuck all about it. Why? Because that's our ally. Human life means nothing. We have to help our ally because what matters is the advancement of our geopolitical interest. You see what I'm saying here? It's horrific. Now check this out. This is crazy. Check this out. Aliyev explicitly names Yerevan and Echmiadzin as Azerbaijani. Excuse me, guys. Do you know? I just said Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. Do you know what Echmiadzin is? Echmiadzin is the Vatican of Armenia. That is the holy region of Armenia. That is where the holiest church of Armenia stands. That is the Mecca of the Armenians. That is the Vatican. That is the Constantinople. That is the Petrarch Lavra of the Armenians. Right there in Echmiadzin. Right there. That's it. That's the holiest place in Armenia. And they want it. They want to take it. And what happened in 1921? The Turks invaded Armenia and they were heading towards Echmiadzin. They were heading towards it. They were about to take the holiest area of all of Armenia, take over the whole thing, destroy the church, all that. What happened? The Armenians fought back, and they had no one there to help them. There was no allies. No one was there to help them. And the Armenians fought back, outnumbered and exhausted, and by a sheer miracle were able to defeat a much larger Ottoman force and protected and defended the holy city, the holy area of Echmiadzin, the holy church of Echmiadzin. They still want to take it. And it makes you think about all these verses in the Old Testament, talking about, Jerusalem being surrounded. But then people say, okay, well, this is the literal city of Jerusalem. No, it's not, because St. John calls Jerusalem Sodom and Egypt. And St. Paul says in his letter to the Hebrews that we are members of the heavenly Jerusalem. He doesn't say we're members of the physical Jerusalem. We are members of the heavenly Jerusalem. So then what does it mean when it says Jerusalem will be surrounded? Christendom will be surrounded. The Christian world will be surrounded. And in 1921, the Turks surrounded Echmiadzin. They were going to invade Echmiadzin, and they were defeated by a force that was so much smaller than the Ottoman force, and by a force that was so much more outgunned than the Ottoman force was. The Ottomans had guns, they had cannons. Armenians had some guns, and they were using knives and whatever weapons they could get to fight. It was really a miracle. If you ever read about the battle over Echmiadzin, it was really a miracle. Go look it up. 1921, Ottoman invasion of Armenia. Truly an amazing story. I did a video about it. And what happened in 1921 is it's a precursing sign. It's a presaging sign of what is to come in the future. Jerusalem will be surrounded. Heavenly Jerusalem will be surrounded. Echmiadzin is surrounded. Armenia is surrounded. And there is Israel, physical, fleshy, earthly Jerusalem. There is Israel, not standing with the Armenians. No. Israel is standing with the Turks. Israel is standing with Azerbaijan. Israel wanted Azerbaijan to take over Nagorno-Karabakh simply for the reason that Armenia is an ally of Iran. And the Israelis hate the Armenians. They have Armenians who live in Israel. They get mistreated by the Jews, by the radical Jews. The Armenians get mistreated. They get spat on by these people, by these fanatics. They don't like the Armenians. They don't give a damn about the Armenians. And they backed the Azeris against the Armenians. Israel did. Why? Because they want Iran's border with Armenia to be under the patrol of NATO. And Israel is laughing right now, just as Haman was laughing, just like Judas was conspiring against Christ, thinking he was going to win if he got his 33 pieces of silver. What happened to these people? They all paved the way to their own self-destruction. That's the bottom line. They all paved the way to their own self-destruction. So it says here, Azerbaijan's military spending has again hit a record $5 billion, which for a small country is very major, which he reads as a signal that Azerbaijan has no intention of establishing peaceful relations with Armenia. We see Azerbaijan preparing for another escalation, and this person is absolutely right. Sadly enough, but he is. Even the corridor itself, the Zangazour corridor, can become a flashpoint with a private American company overseeing operations on a 99-year term. Armenia, Igitian says, loses control over part of its territory because it's no longer up to Armenia to decide what happens in that area. The signatures of the United States and Azerbaijan are already on the document. Armenia is being raped by America, NATO, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Israel. The Zangazour corridor may be framed as a peace project, but its real weight is geopolitical. For Ankara, it's a strategic hinge between the Turkic states of Central Asia and Europe, a physical link that advances a decades-old vision of cultural and political integration. For Washington, it's a rare chance to plant a long-term presence in a region historically under Russian sway. So this is about destroying Russia's underbelly in the South Caucasus, with the added benefit of securing energy routes and potential military supply lines that bypass Moscow and Tehran entirely. For Iran, the corridor's alignment with NATO-linked infrastructure threatens to cut it off from the north and reinforce a chain of allied states stretching from Turkey into Central Asia. So like I said, it's about cutting Iran off from Europe, cutting Iran off from the Black Sea. Whoever controls its operation and security gains leverage over a swath of Eurasia's trade and transit. Leverage that can be used to build alliances, pressure rivals, or recalibrate the balance of power in the region. Now, there is a reason as to why the Europeans are interested in this, and it's not just about trade. It's not just about bypassing the Russians. It is also about serious power, serious geopolitical power. And I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. So many years ago, I wrote an article about Germany's interest in Central Asia, and how for the longest time, the Germans and the Austrians have been very interested in controlling Central Asia. And so it says here that in 2003, the Austrian general Raimund Schittenhelm, yes, that's his last name, gave a presentation in the State Defense Academy, Heidelberg, on the significance of Asia in Austrian geopolitics and globalization, in which he said, quote, "It is to be expected that the world's policy in this century will be strongly influenced by developments in Asia. The anthology should help to awaken awareness of developments in Asia and to understand the patterns of action throughout structures of Asian actors." Okay. Present in the event was Erich Reiter, an Austrian military specialist who was also a strong promoter of Eurasianism and is a member of the far-right Freedom Party, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the biggest party in Austria right now, or at least one of the biggest. The great changes of the present, this is what this writer guy said. He said, the great changes of the present are taking place in Asia because the geopolitics, which are often declared dead, are currently gaining in importance again. In 2003, both Erich Reiter and Peter Hasdra edited a volume on European geopolitics consisting of numerous essays on this subject entitled The Impact of Asian Powers on Global Developments. One of the essays presented is written by Rahul Peter Das, a professor at Martin Luther University of Halle, Wittenberg, and it's entitled Europe in Eurasian Strategic Considerations, Introductory Remarks. Das writes that Europe is becoming more and more irrelevant, while the focus on Asia is becoming greater. So again, this was in 2003. The Germans knew this stuff in 2003. They knew Europe is becoming irrelevant. They knew that Asia was going to be the main goal in geopolitics for the world. And so what they were saying was that the Europeans need to capitalize on this. And so it says here, the United States, Das observes, is focusing more on Asia than it is on Europe, and that Asia is becoming more important politically and militarily. So it says here, this is what Mr. Doss writes. Asia, particularly, is rapidly gaining importance in both the international political and military realms. Developments in this region will increasingly affect events at the global level, and thus also developments bearing on Europe. Furthermore, the United States of America is intensifying its activities in Asia, and this nearly inevitably results in a weakening of its commitment to Europe. So in other words, they were saying back in 2003, America is going to start declining in its commitment to Europe. And we see this sort of thing happening slowly right now. But back in 2003, the Austrians knew about this. Europe, therefore, will more and more be left to its own resources in terms of its potential and its means of influencing global events. In other words, Europe is going to have to become a major power. If Europe is not able to confront these challenges with effective measures, then it will be faced with the danger of marginalization in the sphere of political power. In other words, Europe needs to become relevant. How will it become relevant? Through Central Asia. In one essay entitled New Global Politics, Eric Reiter writes of the idea that whoever controls Eurasia controls the future of the world, thus revealing the objective of global domination in the plan of Eurasia. And this is what this guy said. These are theories, and Nicholas Spikeman, for instance, who carried Mackinder's analysis further, formulated that whoever controls the Eurasian rimland rules Eurasia, and whoever rules Eurasia controls the destiny of the world. Whoever can control Eurasia rules the world. And that is why the Russians are interested in this. That's why the Chinese are interested. That's why the Europeans, that's why the Americans are obsessed with this, because they know if you want to rule the world, you got to control Eurasia. Reiter affirms the geopolitical significance of controlling Central Asia, stating, quote, control over Central Asia is still of geopolitical importance. Although the need for continued Western emphasis on the Eurasian heartland has decreased because of the regained independence of many countries in the heartland, in the longer run, the geopolitical importance of this area could increase because the Eurasian rimland still abounds in potential threats to world order. Thus, Central Asia cannot be disregarded with respect to current geopolitical situations. So the Europeans are eyeing Central Asia. That's why they want this direct trade route from Turkey, thus Europe, into Central Asia, because they want to have that access into Central Asia and they want to be able to beat the Russians. There's a massive geopolitical war that's happening right before our eyes, guys. And the Israelis are involved. Check this out. Here's an article that was published in Russian media on Israel's involvement in all of this stuff. Check this out. People don't talk about this. They just want to say, "Oh, Israel and Hamas and poor Israel, and they have to fight against Iran." Israel is a conspirator in all this nightmare. U.S. and Israel want to invade Iran using Turkey as cover. The Western world will not leave Iran alone if it is not under its control. This is the opinion of Russian journalist Maxim Shevchenko, who explained his point of view in detail on his blog on August 9th. He noted that the main conclusion of the 12-day Iran-Israel war in June was the understanding that it was impossible to defeat Iran without a large-scale land invasion and occupation of the country. Only a complete, so in other words, invade Iran, do regime change, etc. Only a complete military defeat could lead to a change of power. Therefore, the West planned to create a threat to Tehran from the north, from the Transcaucasus, using the Zangazour corridor. So they want to make the Zangazour corridor, empower the Turks, and the Zangazour corridor borders right with Iran, therefore putting NATO right on Armenia's border with Iran, blocking Iran from Georgia and thus from the Black Sea, weakening and isolating the Iranians. And they want to use this corridor as a springboard by which to attack the Iranians. This is why the Iranians are so worried about this. So this Shevchenko guy says the purpose of the Zangazour corridor for Israel and the U.S. is to draw Turkey into the Caspian region and, as a consequence, into a new, as they see it, final conflict with Iran. Are the Turks going to budge? I don't know. But they're trying to say, okay, the Israelis want to pull the Turks into Central Asia, make this giant Turkish power, and use... They want to use Turkey as a weapon against the Iranians. And Israel is thinking, oh, we're going to use the Turks against the Iranians. Really? This weapon that you're forming is going to be used against Israel, just like Judas's own machinations against Christ brought him to his own destruction, just as Haman hung himself using the very noose that he had planned for Mordecai. So the Israelis are making this giant weapon called Turkey. They want to use it against the Iranians. It's going to be used against them. This is the woman riding the beast. The woman rides the beast. The woman rules the beast, but then eventually the beast tears the harlot apart. That's what's going to happen to the Israelis. This harlot will be torn apart. The journalist thinks that a land invasion of Iran could take place if Ankara participates in it, and does not take a neutral position, and it was recently done, as it has recently done. That is, Turkey with its huge army should become part of a large anti-Iranian coalition together with other NATO countries led by the US and Israel. This could possibly happen, but who knows? So it says here that Shevchenko specified that U.S. President Donald Trump, by his intervention, had transformed the narrow regional issue of the road from Baku to Nakhchivan into a strategic issue. Hiding behind talk of peacekeeping and the economy, Washington is pursuing completely different goals. He and his Zionist sponsors and partners are interested in the destruction or peacemaking of Iran. This is an obvious challenge to Tehran to fight, and the U.S. and Israel want to hide behind Turkey. So in other words, they want to provoke Iran to a war. They want to provoke Iran to a war and then use the Turks to go against the Iranians and then hide behind Turkey. Without Erdogan, who would never drag his country into something like this, but who is seriously ill, the war continues. So they want to get rid of Erdogan. And I think this whole movement to overthrow Erdogan is just a NATO-backed movement. But they want to overthrow Erdogan because with Erdogan there, they have someone who doesn't want war with Russia or Iran. So they want to remove Erdogan, and their hope is to put someone who is more fanatical, more nationalistic than Erdogan, to then use him as a weapon against the Russians and possibly against the Iranians.